The Sonos Sub Gen 3 has finally arrived, and today we're going to take a closer look at the Sub Gen 2 and the Sub Gen 3 that I have in front of me. We will explore the differences and the similarities. I thank all my subscribers for being patient with me while I prepare this video. And for those of you who are new to my channel, a very big welcome, and do consider subscribing to get the latest updates and news on wireless audio products, especially for the Sonos product range. The Sonos Sub Gen 1 was launched in June 2012, that's 8 years ago. Then sometime in around 2016, there was news of a new sub moving to Gen 2. I don't remember very well, but it seems that Sonos never officially named the sub as Gen 2. In fact, I don't think there was a difference between the Gen 2 and the previous version, which is probably why Sonos never officially called it Gen 2. In fact, just a few months ago, some of you wouldn't even know that there was actually a Gen 1 or a Gen 2 difference. Then Sonos launched the Sub Gen 3 earlier this month, and we all realized that there was actually a Gen 1 and a Gen 2 difference. Today I've received the Sonos Sub Gen 3, and this is in glossy black. I'll be running through what Sonos Gen 3 is all about, and if there's any reason for us to upgrade, or for that matter, to buy a Gen 2 today. Now, I'd like to quickly answer the question before I go on. This video might turn out to be quite long, and if you can't watch to the end, I want to be able to give you the answer up front. There is no noticeable difference in performance and sound. There will be 4 main differences that you guys have heard about: improved memory, faster CPU, a higher powered wireless receiver, and lastly, a refresh join button right here. If you stay on through the video, I'll be listing another 3 differences which you are likely to have missed in all your research. And even if you already own the Sub Gen 3 now, I'm actually pretty sure that I can still surprise you, because no one reviews a Sonos product like I do. I dig deep. Now first, I'll discuss the 4 published differences that you've likely read about, starting with the first and the second point together, which is the increased memory and the higher powered processor in the Sub Gen 3. A sub, in this case, is a slave device in a Sonos ecosystem. So it's not immediately clear why they have chosen to raise the specs on these 2 fronts. But then again, the CPU upgraded to a quad-core 1.5 GHz isn't exactly a blazing fast one. And for the memory at 256 megabytes, it sounded to me more like a supply ran out for the 128 megabyte flash chips, and therefore they had to actually order new parts. Maybe the older and the slower parts would probably have cost them more to keep using. I'd like to point out that I've noticed different specifications for different regions around the world. Sonos lists the memory for the Gen 3 at 256 megabytes. Whereas the Singapore Sonos website lists it at 2 gigabytes of memory and another 4 gigabytes of flash memory. At these sizes, it doesn't really impact cost much, and we have to be clear, right, that the sub is a slave device, and any capability or smart features are unlikely to be handled by the sub. It's probably going to be handled by the other Sonos devices that you have that this sub is paired with. Unless, of course, you want a very low voice for your Google Assistant or Alexa. I cannot foresee how the increased memory and CPU speed will actually make the Gen 3 a better sub. And I cannot see how the lower memory and the CPU specs is going to handicap the Gen 2 in any way. The third difference, there is a higher powered radio receiver for better range, but it is still at 2.4 GHz. Sonos has been using this standard for a while now, and for its intended purposes, it has worked very well. To change it would mean that it might not be able to communicate with the existing Sonos devices that we have, and that could cause some compatibility issues across the devices. So even if this upgrade wasn't as meaningful as, say, a move to the 5 GHz network, it would still serve you pretty well. The Sonos mesh that it creates is a strong one, and I have very little problem with drop signals in my years of using Sonos products. So if the only reason why they upgraded this is for better range, then I'm all for it. Note that when you plug just one Sonos device into a LAN port, it sets itself up like a Sonos Boost network, and it effectively manages the entire mesh of Sonos products in your network. That frees up your Wi-Fi network from the load that the Sonos speakers will present. If you have not already done so, I strongly encourage that you start experimenting with this configuration. I have my beam set up with a LAN port in the living room, and I've never had any problems trying to reach any of the other Sonos speakers in other parts of the house. The fourth difference, which you all should know about, is that there is only one visible difference that you can see from the outside, the difference between the two generations, and that is the joint button. So instead of the older square button that is on the Gen 2, the Gen 3 has a visually refreshed one. It sits in line with the rest of the Sonos design language for the newer speakers. The Gen 2 square ones, if you don't know, it looks exactly like the square ones on the first gen Sonos Play 1, the Play 3s and the Play 5s. Well, in order to streamline the parts, it probably makes a lot of sense for Sonos to change the button to the one that is being used throughout the rest of the speakers that they are currently selling. Other than that, there is no functionality difference between the two buttons. Sonos has not officially said this, but there is supposedly Bluetooth Low Energy Radio and NFC radio within the Sub Gen 3, which supposedly helps with the setup process, but I did not find any official literature on this, so I won't spend too much time talking about this point. So earlier I mentioned the 4 differences that you guys have heard about, but I'd like to share 3 more differences that you're likely to have missed. First, there is one subtle difference which I'll highlight here, which is the idle power draw. This is not too much of a problem, but the Sub Gen 3 draws about 3.2 to 3.3 watts in idle mode, whereas the Sub Gen 2 draws about 3.8 to 3.9 watts in idle mode. This difference sounds almost negligible. If you work out the power draw, the difference works out to be about 15 watt hours in a day, or 450 watt hour over the course of a month, and in a year, about 5.4 kilowatt hour, all assuming you leave it on 24 hours a day. And in most cases and in most parts of the world, this won't cost you anything more than $1 a year. If you really wanted to save some power, then you might do better turning it off when it's not in use. Second difference, the LED light is slightly different. In the previous Gen 2 model, when the LED light is flashing, it really flashes. It's like a LED on, LED off cycle. In the Gen 3 sub, the LED pulses, as in it fades in and fades out. Now, this is purely cosmetic and has absolutely no bearings on the function or performance, just looks. Now, these 2 differences and all the previous differences so far wouldn't make you want to change or upgrade or make a decision between the Sub 2 or the Sub 3. But the third point, which you're likely to have missed, is going to be a major consideration. And that is, the drivers are completely different. No one is saying this, and because it is tucked away out of sight, most people can't readily tell. Sonos isn't telling us that there are differences, and if anything, almost every source on the internet says there are no differences. There are 2 ways the drivers differs. It is hard to measure, but the most apparent difference is that the dish shape is different. The dish is deeper on the Sub Gen 3, and that gives more airspace between the 2 drivers. If you look at this plastic contraption that I have here and see how I try to move them in between the cones, you will see that there is a significant difference between the 2 models. There is a difference of close to an inch. A deeper dish shape indicates that there is likely more surface area. And more surface area should technically mean that there is more bass being generated. Now, this is all else being equal. The second way that the driver differs is in the cone rubber surround. If you take a closer look at the rubber surround, you'll notice that the rubber surround on the Sub Gen 2 is very generous. It makes the cone surface area slightly smaller, but we know that a sturdy rubber surround for a sub is going to allow for much longer stroke of the driver, which is the excursion of the driver. The Sub Gen 2 has proven itself over the long run that it manages such long driver throws at highly punishing levels. The Gen 3 rubber surround is a lot thinner. I'm not sure if you can tell the difference between the 2 visually, but I'm going to show you anyway with a best effort picture. Now, what a thinner surround possibly means is that the stroke of the driver is going to be a little bit shorter, and it also means that there is less bass. But this arrangement also means that the actual surface area of the cone is slightly larger. There's definitely a difference, but at this point, I've not figured out how to measure the tiny differences accurately. Now, how all this stacks up and if there are any sonic differences will require more extensive listening tests. I will be conducting more intensive tests this weekend when I get some time to work on it. And if you are keen to follow up on that video, please do subscribe to my channel, and I'll be going deep into how this major driver difference affects the performance of the Sub Gen 3, if at all, and if it even improves on the Sub Gen 2. Right now, through the short listening test that I've had, I can't hear any meaningful differences. So other than those that I have listed earlier, there are no other differences that I can detect. I did a close-up inspection and everything seems to look exactly the same. I have tested the sub, and sonically there's no discernible difference in bass quality between the two. Given that the cones are completely redesigned, I'm actually quite surprised that there is so little sonic difference. I'll run a short clip at the end of the video to let you compare the Sonos Sub Gen 2 and the Sonos Sub Gen 3 in a Sonos Arc with surround sound environment. You might not be able to pick up the differences over a recording and whatever devices you are listening to them on, but you have to trust my ears. I cannot detect the differences in the 10-20 minutes of listening to the various clips and music sources earlier. And this is despite the difference in the drivers, as I've pointed out above. Maybe Sonos has changed the drivers, but still tuned the profile of the sound to ensure that the response stays within the predetermined range. Both the Gen 2 and the Gen 3 are rated to go down to 25 Hz. Having similarities in this case is a good thing. Sometimes if something ain't broken, you don't want to fix it. In the case of the Sonos Sub Gen 2, I am hard-pressed to find faults with this guy. For those of you who have been following my channel for a while, you would have realized that I have nothing but good things to say of the Sonos Sub. In fact, you have heard me recommending the Sub to viewers many a times. I've done a power test video for the Sub Gen 2, which I'm linking up here above, and suffice to say that the power draw is super impressive for a sub of this dimension and this size. Without referencing the physical differences in the cone design, both of these subs have two horizontally opposed elliptical drivers powered by two discrete digital amplifiers. Sonos calls them the force cancelling drivers, and there are two of them. So in effect, it is already two subs in one enclosure. And the same amazing vibration cancelling design in both subs. When the subs are called upon to do its duties, the two drivers move together out of sync and effectively cancels out any cabinet vibrations. If you place your hands on the cabinet, even when it's going crazy, you'll never feel any vibration. The intended effect is like having two subs working together to cancel out each other's vibration, leaving only pure sound coming out of the sub and not vibration. The only vibration you're going to hear is from the sound waves that are being pushed out of the sub. The impact is palpable and it can be felt at high levels. You will not be disappointed by either of these subs. If you are familiar with subs, you will also know that getting such gut-punching effects is common in ported sub designs. If you take a close look at the Sonos Sub, you actually won't be able to see any cylindrical or slotted ports on the sub itself. There are two windows through which the two drivers are then exposed through. It's a very smart design. Actually, these are the ports. But the speaker ports are supposed to be behind the cone, so you can vent air out, right? You can then boost output through physics and smart design, increasing the levels even with a smaller powered amplifier. If you peer into what they call the acoustic ports and look either up or down with a torchlight, you'll notice that there are actually two cavities leading into the opposite sides of the sub cabinet. I've reached inside all the way before with a scope, and it goes through to the back of the drivers into the speaker cabinets itself. This is a very smart design, and you simply get a clean, elegantly designed sub that sits into almost any environment seamlessly. I've not seen any subs like this over the years, and this is not simply something that you can copy without infringing some copyrights. The design is unique that once it's been thought of, there's no other variation that looks like it and works as well as it does. In terms of similarities, I'll say that the two generations are practically twins, both in terms of performance and functionality, except that there's a difference in the mold of the face, which is basically these two buttons here. It helps you tell the twins apart. Well, actually I was so afraid I couldn't tell them apart that I bought the Gen 3 in a different color from the Gen 2 that I already have. And as far as the color choice is concerned, you can have either all the colors masterfully blended into one, white, or you can have a total absence of color, which is black. So just white and black. The difference in the drivers aren't immediately obvious from just a glance. In fact, you need a torch and you need to reach inside to actually even tell the difference. So at this point in time, you might be presented with two choices. Do I wait for the stocks of the Sub Gen 3 and pay full retail price for it? Or do I just snag an older Sub Gen 2 for a good discount and start to enjoy it straight away? The ship date for the Sub Gen 3 is well into mid-August, even if you place an order today. So there is a long lead time on the Gen 3 at this moment. Before we go on, let me be clear about one thing. Sonos launched the S2 platform for all its current speakers. In fact, the newly announced Sonos Arc, the Sonos Sub Gen 3, as well as the Sonos 5, requires the S2 platform. There are speakers on the legacy list which can only be supported by S1. Most notably, that would be the Sonos Play 5 Gen 1. But other than that, even the Sonos Play 3, which was launched 9 years ago, is being supported by the S2 platform. The Sonos Sub, regardless of generation, is being supported by the Sonos S2 controller app and platform. Some of you are concerned about whether Sonos will cease support for the Sonos Sub Gen 2. You can rest assured that Sonos will continue to support it for at least the next 5 years. An extension of the point is that if you are using a Sonos Play 5 Gen 1, then you cannot be using the Sub Gen 3. You will have to buy the Sub Gen 2, as the Gen 1 Play 5s only works on the S1 platform, whereas the Sonos Sub Gen 3 requires a Sonos S2 platform. For almost every other product out there, from the oldest Play 1s to the newest Sonos 5s, from the Play Bar to the newest Arc, both the Gen 2 and the Gen 3 Sub are compatible. Then you only have 2 points of consideration in trying to make a buying decision. First, future-proofing. If you want to be sure to get like 10 years of support and shelf life out of the product, then go for the Gen 3. Sonos is almost guaranteed to support their products in excess of a decade. I speak from history, but if any company ownership changes over time, don't hold me to this. As for the Sonos Sub Gen 2, they're still selling it as of now, and given that it is in their catalog at this point in time, I'll safely say that they'll be supporting it for at least the next 5 years. Again, the same ownership caveats apply. While there's no obvious path to obsolescence, the Gen 2 will likely be deprecated earlier than the Gen 3. But then it leads us to the second point of consideration, which is the price. Today, the Sonos Sub Gen 3 retails for a full retail price of $699. You can get a $100 price savings on the Sub Gen 2 if you look around a little bit, and you don't even have to try very hard. I'll place some affiliate links for the Gen 2 if you want to save some money going with the Gen 2. Some of the obscure lower volume retailers with slightly older X stock for the Gen 2 might be trying to sell it for anything between $100 and $200 savings. Some viewers have reported prices as low as 450 euros. And that is if you buy new. If you are willing to look around in the used market, you can probably get a unit for around 300 to 350 US dollars. I'll say it's a good buy considering you're going to get updates for the next 5 years. In conclusion, I highly recommend the Sonos Sub. Whether you get the Gen 2 or the Gen 3, you'll be enjoying your Sonos speakers and setup much more. If you have already a Sub Gen 2, there's very little reason for you to upgrade. If you have some legacy products and you can't upgrade, then you're stuck with the Gen 2. I hope that the video has been useful in helping you reach a buying decision. And if you do decide to buy either, you can check out the Amazon affiliate links that I've listed down below in the video description. Again, consider subscribing if you're keen on wireless audio and join the community of wireless audiophiles on my channel. I am especially invested in the Sonos ecosystem, and I'm willing to share everything that I know about Sonos. Meanwhile, if you have any questions on the Sonos Sub, do fire off in the comment section below. For now, enjoy the next video clip that is coming up, which will showcase the Sub Gen 2 first, and then I'll move on to play the same clip with the Sub Gen 3 paired with an Arc with a surround sound setup. I'll see you in my next video.
This is Dolby Atmos, the world's first object-based cinematic audio. With powerful moving audio that transcends from channels to moving around you with pinpoint accuracy. Whether the soundscape system moved to the scene captures the full extent
Do you want to know my secret?
of nature's fury. This is Dolby Atmos, the world's first object-based cinematic audio. With powerful moving audio that transcends from channels to moving around you with pinpoint accuracy. Whether the soundscape sets the mood of a scene
Whoa! What is this place? Morning, guys, let's go!
or captures the full extent
Do you want to know my secret?
of nature's fury.